There's no clash of civilizations any more than there was before. Comment on the nature of the anti-war sentiment in the U.S. and the West. What about the left? The Marxist response to the September 11th, and so on. Would I bracket them with Christopher Hitchens' response, which is like the clash of civilizations? First of all, remember that in the United States and in Western Europe, there is no Marxist response. There's no Marxist movement. So the left is something different. It doesn't have the Marxist orientation except for small sects. But there's a very powerful left and a very powerful anti-war sentiment. Most of the population by now is strongly opposed to U.S. aggression and violence. It's a big change from 40 years ago. You saw that in the 1980s. Remember, the war on terrorism is not new. The Reagan administration called it 20 years ago and proceeded to organize massive international terrorism on an unprecedented scale, primarily against Central America, but also in Africa and West Asia and elsewhere. However, they were unable to do what John F. Kennedy had done 20 years earlier. He was just able to send the U.S. military forces to invade South Vietnam and to attack the rest of the country. Reagan couldn't do that. He could not send the U.S. military to bomb, to occupy Nicaragua. He couldn't send B-52s to bomb El Salvador. That was ruled out. And it was ruled out by public opposition to direct aggression and violence, which is very strong. Therefore, the Reagan administration had to resort to clandestine terrorism, huge terrorist network, including client states like Britain and Taiwan and Israel and Saudi Arabia and others, to support paramilitary forces and client military forces to try to crush the population. Huge international terrorism. But that's because of the anti-war sentiment, and that remains. Right now, there's a sense of, naturally, of shock and fear and despair over the atrocities, which is quite right. But the population is not in favor of war. When you read the headlines, it may look like that. But if you look more closely, it's a very mixed, confused situation. I know I myself have even been on national television in interchange programs with mass audiences, something which never happened before. And they're quite, the questions that come in the discussions are reasonable. People want punishment for the ones who carried out the atrocities, but they don't want to kill innocent people. That's why the huge humanitarian catastrophe in Afghanistan is not being reported. You watch CNN or BBC or read the newspapers, you read very little about the fact that hundreds of thousands, maybe even millions of people are facing imminent starvation and death as a result of the U.S. response to the September 11th atrocities. That's what ought to be the headlines. I mean, that's a major crime, but it's barely mentioned. And the reason it's barely mentioned is because of an understanding that if the population knows anything about it, they won't permit it, and therefore it has to be suppressed, and it is suppressed. Christopher Hitchens is a different story. He's, can talk about that, but he's a particular individual who happens to have gone completely berserk on this issue. That doesn't mean much, and it's not interesting. You, the American, really agree with the U.S. policies of supporting I'm not sure I understand this. Do I agree with the U.S. policies of supporting authoritarian and brutal regimes in order to protect U.S. economic and military interests? No, certainly not. We should oppose such efforts with all of our strength. They have a horrible effect on the world and are extremely dangerous. The public has to be excluded from the process of decision-making, manufacturing consent, and so on. It was reported that the Doha agenda was passed by Europe and the United States using the war situation. People weren't informed of the hidden agenda. Lots of questions like that. Yeah, that's true. I mean, it is understood, particularly in the more democratic societies. Strikingly, first in the United States and Britain, and extending to other more democratic societies. It was understood 100 years ago That's explicitly understood. That's why the United States and Britain have huge public relations industries, which are devoted to propaganda, to what they call regimenting the public mind. And the purpose is very explicit: make sure that the population does not get involved in what's none of their business, namely public affairs. They're supposed to be occupied with something else, buying shoes or watching sports or something or other, but not getting involved in controlling their own lives, whether in the workplace or in the political arena or anywhere else. That's the goal of what's called manufacturing consent. Not my term. The term that was used by the leading figure in 20th century media and the leading public intellectual in the United States in the 20th century, Walter Lippmann. Very explicit. We have to manufacture consent to ensure that the public remains spectators, not participants, in affairs that deal with their lives. The neoliberal programs of the past 20 years are simply another device to try to undermine democracy and remove the public and to manufacture consent, in this case not by direct violence, but by the fear of insecurity and so on. As far as Doha is concerned, the U.S. and Europe have their own agendas, which are incidentally not exactly identical. They have some conflicts, and they would like to ram them through. But it doesn't have to happen. The end result of the Doha conference was to delay the issues. They didn't really reach any specific decisions. They delayed them to secret negotiations, in which people won't be able to see anything about what's happening. What goes on in those secret negotiations is the responsibility to determine. That's the responsibility of people like you and me. We have to compel our governments to act in ways that are humane and decent, or simply to withdraw from the whole system. That's in public hands. These things are carried out in secret precisely because they're afraid of the public. And they make it very clear. The public is an enemy, which has to be controlled by silence and ignorance. And if the public discovers what's happening, they rise up and protest. It's happened again and again, increasingly in the last few years. So it's not really a hidden agenda. Yeah, I'm sorry. I'll have to stop. But it's a perfectly open agenda. We understand what it is. It's class war, and naturally the masters, one side of the class war, fights it all the time, relentlessly. They use every opportunity. The questioner mentioned September 11th. That was a window of opportunity that allowed them to ram through harsh, regressive measures. Yeah, I'll stop. Yeah, I understand. Yeah. And they want everyone else to stop, to look somewhere else, to feel patriotic and submissive and so on. You just have to resist that. What will be the outcome of the World Trade Organization negotiations, or even whether it will exist, is in the hands of the public. And they just have to understand that and be willing to organize and act to reach their own objectives. Lots of other really interesting questions, and I'm sorry I'm not allowed to talk about them, but I got instructions that I have to stop, so thank you.